Hi, you must be Louise.
I am Louise. Hello, Jill.
Hello,
You must be
Louise.
Jill.
I am. Gosh, we're clever.
It's my Hello and good afternoon. I hope that you've all had a fabulous day in school, and I am really pleased that you're able to join us at 4 o'clock on the afternoon on a Thursday. I know you're limping towards the weekend, so thank you. We really, really appreciate it. There will be a YouTube copy of the video, so if you do get called away by children or traffic or anything, do feel free to catch up on the video later. So my name is Louise Dawson, and I'm very happy today to introduce you to Gill Clark. And Gill Clark works for Elklan. Elklan is a UK-based organisation, but they do have trainers that are based full-time here in the UAE. And they provide training and resources to support speech and language and communication development, most importantly, communication, to children and young people. And they offer accredited courses for teachers and teaching assistants, speech and language therapists, and parents that focus on practical strategies which help learners with communication needs across all age groups. So, welcome, Jill. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining us. You're welcome. Today we're going to be talking about one of the things, developmental language disorder. Okay, one of those categories we were talking off air, one of the categories that are often overlapping with conditions like ADHD or autism, but also sometimes mistaken for other. We were talking about how very much we're jumping straight to autism without having a look at all of those underlying challenges. Difficulties may appear subtle and inconsistent across different contexts, but it is often mistaken for low ability or poor attention as well. And Jill's here today to talk us through all of these things and give us a little bit of an insight and a little bit of depth around the condition. So, like I said, Jill, thank you very much for joining us. What I would like to do is invite you to take the floor, share your slides when
Fantastic.
you are ready, introduce yourself, and the audience is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you all today. I am a speech and language therapist, as you have just heard. I'm based in the beautiful city of York in North Yorkshire. If anyone knows or has ever been to York, it's a very beautiful place, but I think you're probably beating me weather-wise right now. We are amidst cold, rain, autumn days. So I hear it's quite nice in Dubai at the moment. Maybe I'll come out and see you all out there. Who knows? So I'm here to talk to you about developmental language disorder today. It is a common condition, and I will talk through what that looks like, how to spot it, how children might be missed, and also some simple strategies that you can use with children who have speech, language, and communication needs, but specifically have DLD as well. So I will shorten it to DLD from now on because developmental language disorder is a bit of a mouthful when you're saying it fairly frequently. So DLD. So let me just share my screen with you and then I can talk through the slides. I do have the slides as a handout for you, which I will send to Louise to share with you at the end of the session. So what is developmental language disorder?
Thank you. We've got the screen. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. That's great. I am happy to take questions as we go through, or we will have space for opportunities for questions at the end. So whatever feels more comfortable, if there's a natural break where you can chip in with a question, please go for it. Probably the easiest is if you put a hand up and maybe Louise just lets me know that someone's got a question that I find it quite hard to monitor that as well as speak. So that probably will work well. Or just save your questions and we'll have a chance to have a chat at the end. So is it going to move on for me? There we go. So the aims of this afternoon are that by the end of the session, you will know what developmental language disorder is. You will know what the impact can be for children, how it can impact them within their learning, within their social and emotional development, and within their behaviour as well. So what the impacts might be for children. You'll be able to use some key indicators of DLD, and also we're going to share some simple strategies for children that you are working with to support them. So I don't know if DLD is something that you have heard of, not heard of. Lots of teachers and education staff have maybe heard it mentioned, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. And I love this quote. So DLD is probably the most common childhood condition that you've never heard of. So it may be that lots of you haven't heard of DLD and you're not sure what it is, and that's okay. That's why I'm here today, to share that with you. So what is developmental language disorder? It is a issue and ongoing difficulty with talking and or with understanding what other people say, for which there is no obvious cause. So you can't have DLD and be autistic. You can't have DLD and have ADHD. Obviously, you can have speech, language, and communication needs within that, but the diagnosis of DLD itself means that those language difficulties and language needs are there aside from any other explanation. So it's the children where actually you're not sure why they're struggling with communication, because there's no other reason to explain it for them. It's really common. So it affects 7.5% of children. That means that there are 2 or 3 children in every class of 30 children who have DLD. So it's really common, but from that point of view, it is something that people are less aware of. So I would just ask you to reflect. If you're in a classroom, you've got 30-ish children, are you aware of the 2 or 3 children that may have DLD and are struggling with language? Or are they going under that radar and maybe being missed and not having a support that they need because we're not aware of those needs? So as I've said, 2 children in the average classroom have DLD, 2 to 3. I'll put some resources on at the end and some websites that you can visit to find out a little bit more. RADL is one of the best websites if you want to research a little bit more. It's an international group that are researching and supporting children and adults with DLD. So it's a brilliant website to go to for resources, and you'll see I've used some of their resources in the presentation today. So RADLD stands for what does it stand for? Research and it's under there and I can't read it, an awareness of developmental language disorder. So I just call it RADL. DLD has no obvious cause, as I've mentioned. So for a diagnosis of DLD, there must be no other medical condition or learning need that accounts for those language differences. There is a strong genetic link. So we see parents that have DLD have children that have DLD, just the same as you do with autism. It's also a lifelong condition. So children who have DLD become adults who have DLD. They don't get better from DLD. They can adapt, they can compensate, and we can help them with functional skills and with their communication, but we can't get rid of their DLD. That's part of them. It's part of their neurodivergence. So DLD is another neurodivergent condition, just as autism is, as Tourette's is, as ADHD is. So we would not expect children with DLD to get better from their DLD, but they will make progress with their language skills with the right support. So I like the quote that says, DLD is to spoken language what dyslexia is to written language. So if you've got dyslexic children, they become dyslexic adults. So just the same, children with DLD become adults with DLD. What's the difference between SLCN and DLD? So speech, language and communication needs. Lots of children have speech, language and communication needs. They don't all have DLD. So a child with DLD does have speech, language and communication needs. That's what they are finding difficult and what their differences are with. But a child with a hearing loss or a child with autism has SLCN, not DLD, because you can't have those 2 diagnoses. So although all these children have speech, language and communication needs, their pattern of need is very different. And DLD affects people from around the world, regardless of their age, their gender and their ethnicity. It doesn't care. DLD is not selective about who is affected. So anyone can be impacted by DLD. And these are the aspects of communication that are affected by DLD. So it affects the ability to understand spoken language and to use spoken language. That impacts on a child's reading and on their writing, because language is the medium through which teachers teach and children learn. And so it does affect their learning, but their literacy. And I always say, if children can't write, if they can't say it, they're not going to be able to write it. So it's really important that we look at any children that have got differences with their reading and their writing, and we consider whether language can be contributing to that. Because if they can't say it, they're not going to be able to write it. And I often use the example here of things like time connectives. So something I've seen in children's goals, they're going to need to use time connectives in their writing, in their written work. So they need to use words like for and before and after, and then. And when you listen to a child's spoken language, the only connective that they're using is and. So you listen to their narratives, and it's and. So they're not going to use those time connectives in their written language if they can't use it in their spoken language. So those spoken language skills underpin their reading and they underpin their writing. And that in itself impacts on their learning, but it more broadly than reading and writing, it impacts on their ability to gain knowledge and demonstrate their knowledge about the world, about topics. So it can impact their vocabulary skills, which impacts on their learning. It can impact on their understanding of abstract concepts, so describing words, positional vocabulary, size, all of those words, that impacts on their learning. The other thing that it has a massive impact on is that child's ability to make and maintain friendships. And this is sometimes where that overlap with autism can be, because you can have a child that might be quite isolated socially, and we're thinking, they can't make friends, they can't keep friends, they're not really interacting with other children. That language can be such a barrier to those interaction skills with other children. And if you think of children and the kind of language skills that they are using in their play at sort of 6, 7, 8 years old, it's, I'm the teacher and you're in my class and you're going to sit there and I'm going to read the story and you're going to do this, and all of those language skills that come out through that joint cooperative play as part of friendships can be really impacted. The other big impact is on children's emotional well-being. And there is a very strong correlation between later mental health needs and early speech, language and communication needs. And children who've got speech, language and communication needs, including DLD, are at least twice as likely to have mental health needs as an adult. So very, very strong link with that, with mental health, but also with behaviour as well. And if you think of children that are struggling perhaps to express themselves verbally, they may express that through their behaviour. So looking again at any behaviour, what could be the cause of that, and thinking, could it be language? That's always in the back of my head. Could it be language? So that's another one of the little visuals from Ragdoll. So people with DLD have difficulties with talking and understanding, and really important to bear that in mind. So thinking about that impact, children with DLD are 6 times more likely to have reading difficulties. They're 6 times more likely to have spelling difficulties. They're 4 times more likely to have difficulties with maths, and they're 12 times more likely to have difficulties across those 3 areas of learning. So these are children where their DLD is having a massive impact on them, in the classroom especially. So what I'm going to do is show you a little video clip. I think Louise might just take over for a minute while I just
help you while you do your different screens. It's fascinating, isn't it, how the overlap with conditions. I think so many times, those of us that are not educational psychologists, we jump to things, but actually you can see the coexisting challenges with all of those other conditions like dyslexia or dyspraxia or dyscalculia or ADHD, etc. So we're hoping that there will be some sound on this video, and
I'm hoping so.
oh,
We'll try it and see.
no
If
problem.
you
I'll give
can't
you the thumbs up
hear
if it
it,
happens. Okay.
yeah, give me a thumbs up. I like this little video. It's another adult clip because it's children's voices. So I'm somebody that likes to hear impact from children. So we can read statistics, we can read books on things, but actually, what's it like for children to have DLD? So I like this video clip because that's what's covered. So let's see if it's going to play.
Hi, I'm Eddie. And I'm Dills. We're here to tell about DLD, Developmental Language Disorder. Let's go, hurry up. Come on, we don't have all day. Today we're going to find out about DLD and explain 3 things what you have to know. DLD 1, 2, 3. We're going to interview some people, but we can't find them anywhere. Ah, found you! Have you heard of DLD? Developmental Language Disorder. It's when you have difficulties talking and understanding words. Who has DLD? It affects children and adults. Has it always been called DLD? It's been called lots of things like SLI, but now it's been agreed being called DLD. What's DLD like? It's just like they're speaking different language. You're not even like oblivious of what they're saying to you. You just want them to speak English, not those big words, because it's just making it way more harder. You really want to say something, and it just stops. Your brain is just gone. Is that the word? No, it's not. Is it this one? No, it's not. It's picking out loads of different things. I just want it to teleport to the other person's head so they know what it means and they get what I'm trying to say to them as quickly as I can. So there you are, Dills. DLD is when children or adults have problems with talking or understanding. Well, that's really interesting, Eddie. I'm going to try and find out some more. Why do we need to know about DLD?
It's very important that we know about DLD because it's very common, but it's very hidden. And a lot of people don't realize that. It affects about 2 children in every classroom, which is really surprising.
So why does it matter?
It is important because it affects reading, writing, learning, joining in with things, and of course self-esteem. We weren't aware our child had DLD because it was hidden. Even though it's common, it's hidden, and we weren't understanding that he had difficulties at school with his learning, his understanding, which all affected his self-esteem.
So there you go, Eddie. It's really common and it's hidden. It can make lots of things hard, like school and reading. It can be hard joining in and feeling good about yourself. I see, Dylan. Let's see if there's any help. What help is out there?
There's all sorts of help. I was helped by speech language therapists, teachers and other professionals. My parents helped me. In fact, all sorts of people can help you. Your colleagues and your friends too.
How can they help?
It really makes a difference if people can understand about DLD. It's hard for me to explain what DLD means, but when people do understand, it makes a big difference.
So, Dylan, there is help. And everybody can help by knowing about DLD. So remember, DLD 1, 2, 3. share our film. Thank you for watching.
You're right, it is lovely to hear children's voices. What we'll also do is make sure there's a copy of the link in the email that comes out after the event. Gill, are you, just something that struck me there, are you going to talk about the difference between DLD and like a lisp? Because it actually sounds and could be put down to a lisp or a tongue challenge. Is that covered in your future slides, or is there something you'd like to share now?
No, I'm happy. I haven't covered that actually. I'm happy to pick that up. So a lisp is a very isolated articulation difficulty. So it is a child that has learned to say a specific sound incorrectly. So that doesn't lead to that impact and those challenges for children. So that wouldn't come under the umbrella of DLD. Lisps are actually fairly straightforward to fix by a speech and language therapist. Providing a child is really motivated to do that. If a child's not bothered about a lisp in the slightest, it's going to be tricky to fix. So yeah, there's lots we can do.
Say the same about a lot of things, right? Yes. So I always, I don't know if you want to share your slides while we're talking, it's fine. Yeah. I always say that about things like medication or about eyeglasses. In that, you know, if the eyeglasses help a child to see, they will wear them. And if they're not helping a child, then often they won't wear them because they don't see the benefit of it. So, you know, fighting with a child over these things can often cause more, inflict more pain than good.
Yeah. And I think about things like a lisp. If a child's not bothered, then you know, if they're not being impacted by it and it's not bothering them, fixing it actually it takes a bit of effort and hard work. You know, it's not going to fix itself on its own. That child
it's ableism, right? Is that everyone has to be the same, and
exactly,
we don't like that.
Exactly. I know lots of adults that have a lisp that don't have DLD, and actually the impact for them, it's not impacting on their literacy and their reading and their writing, their friendships. Perhaps makes them a little bit vulnerable to bullying if other children spot it and comment, but it's not having the impact that DLD will have for them.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
We'll make sure that link's in the email as well.
Great. It's in the slide.
It's one of those emails that you can send out to all your teachers in school and say, hey, if you've got 5 minutes in between class, have a look at this and have a think about 2 children in every classroom. That's crazy.
It is crazy, and I really like the fact that it emphasizes the fact that it's hidden. I was going to talk about a little girl that I've just assessed, but actually this kind of leads, before I move on, leads into it quite naturally, because there's a little girl that I'm working with here in York at the moment who she is 10. She's in the UK school system. She's in year 5. Bright, articulate, lovely, sociable little girl, big girl at 10. And all the time she's been at school, there's just been something that has been a barrier to learning. Parents have been amazing. They've taken her for an autism assessment. No, it's not autism. ADHD. No, it's not ADHD. They had an educational psychologist do assessments with her. No, but big difference between her verbal IQ and her non-verbal IQ. And at that point, the educational psychologist went, look, there's differences here with her language. And the parents went, well, no, she's fine. Talking's fine. There's no issues with her talking. And then as we started to unpick and assess her language, huge language needs that had never been suspected. And as soon as we started to unpick that, and mum and dad were going, oh yeah, she does do that. You know what? Yeah, she is that child that watches and waits and a little bit behind everyone else. She is the child that stares at your face intently looking for those extra clues. And the whole picture made sense. But that child has gone under the radar all the way through her primary school up to the year before she transitions to secondary. So really interesting with her. And the loveliest thing for her has been able to tell her there's a reason that you're finding language difficult. It's DLD. And I love, she's given DLD a name. She's named it. And I think that's fab. And I can't remember what she's named it.
That is lovely.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
It's so lovely.
It's ownership,
then,
but also taking it out of her. So it's not her challenge.
It's not her.
This thing over here, which is part of her, but can be, you know, represented in a different way. That's quite good for self-esteem, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And mum has tuned into that. And when she's having a moment where she can't think of what something's called, or she's struggling to follow an instruction, mum just goes, oh, you're having a DLD moment. It's okay. Yeah. And then the blame is shifted from, I'm not clever, I don't understand what's going on, I find this hard, to DLD is the reason for this.
Absolutely. So disconnecting
it's
it
wonderful.
From intellect. It's like all of these special needs. You've got all of your conditions on one side, your autisms, your developmental delay, developmental language, all of that's on one side, but you can be intelligent on any of that scale, right? The completely separate things. It's like, I call them the sliding scales.
Yeah, I think it came clear in that video as well with the girl talking about, I just want to teleport. And you know that she's got such a lovely ability to describe what it's like using amazing language, and yet language is still really tricky for her. So yeah, it's nice to bring real examples and real people into that training, I think.
Right, let's get back on track.
Yeah, let's.
I'm great for going offline.
No, I like going down rabbit trails, it's great. So this kind of picks up on the fact that DLD is hidden and sometimes missed by parents, so missed by the parents of this girl. And part of that is because language used at home is often simple, it's routine, and it's predictable. So sometimes parents might say, but they understand everything at home. There's no differences with their understanding at home. And then when you unpick, actually, the kind of language they can understand at home is, go get your shoes and your coat on because we're going out in the car, while mum's holding the car keys with her own coat on, looking at her watch going, we're going to be late. So, you know, a child can follow lots of language without needing to follow the language itself, but they use those context clues, the big picture, non-verbal communication, and children with DLD are experts at using all of those non-verbal extra clues to help them support language, whether it's just a little like, what you do, oh right, we're doing that, and off they go. So really easily missed at home because of that. It's also hidden because the vocabulary and the language used at school is much more varied and complex than the language used at home. If you think of the concepts and the vocabulary that children are expected to learn, and the curriculum demands of them, sometimes DLD is picked up at school where it's not being picked up at home. So parents might not be aware, but others can miss it too, and often missed by school. And there's in the UK, a big research study of youth offenders. And this study is a very well quoted study, but it found that 60% of young people in the youth justice system in the UK had speech, language, and communication needs that had never been identified. So those young people ended up in a system potentially because they didn't have the language that was needed, that was picked up as behaviour, that behaviour is escalated without anyone addressing their language needs. So huge correlation, but lots of children that are potentially being missed and then being picked up much later, by which time lots of damage has been done for that young person. So it's really important that we are able, I put on there, it's really essential that we're able to identify DLD. Because although the difficulties can be subtle, and the differences between them and their peers can be subtle, and identification can be challenging, we need to know who these children are so that we can support them effectively, because there's a lot that we can do for them. So what is the impact? I think we've already covered this, but it impacts on their ability to understand and use spoken language, their reading and writing, their learning, their friendships, and their emotional well-being. So bear that in mind as those impacts for the children. This is also off the RADLD website. I like this graphic because it shows all those different impacts. and how those affect a child's ability to speak, remember, learn, interact, tell narratives, their sentences, and their word, and use learn vocabulary. So I'm just going to spend a little moment on this slide. I know it's a little bit tricky to see, especially if you're on a smaller device like a tablet or something. But if we start around the top with the yellow, so for children with DLD, they will have difficulties following instructions, and those children may be missed because they are masking, they're looking what other children are doing, they're looking at the whole context, the whole situation, but difficulty following instructions. They may have difficulty remembering sounds and words. They may have difficulty learning patterns as well. So for some children, learning patterns that's part of learning can be really tricky for them. That social language, communicating in different situations, requires language. Having conversations requires language. And sometimes they miss those social cues as well, that affect and impact on their ability to use language socially to interact with other children. Oops, sorry. Oh, hang on, sorry. It moved on. I was trying to move the little thumbnails around so I could read the slide. Discourse, so telling stories, narrative, writing stories. Find it hard to follow stories when you're telling a story in class. You know, what's going to happen next? Oh, I'm not sure. Why did they do that? How does the character feel? What could they do differently? How could they solve that problem? All of those skills involved in stories, hugely impacted by DLD. Sequencing itself is really tricky for children with DLD, and difficulties reading between the lines. So that inference, explaining inference, really can be tricky for children with DLD. And then we've got sentences. So forming a sentence, using the right grammar, or putting the words in the right order, missing out little words or whole words, or that kind of sequencing comes into it again. So ordering their sentences and using the right tenses. And so many tenses, you know, all of the different little words that go with tenses as well, the is, have, can, should, will, all of those words that go alongside a verb are so tricky for children to use and remember the right one. For their words, their vocabulary development, often they've got a smaller vocabulary, so they don't know as many words as their peers. They may use non-specific words. So for some children, if they can't think what a word's called, it may just stall what they're saying. So they may stop and go, oh, I forgot. So for some children, it can just cause them to stop. For another child, they might talk around it or use words like at, that. Oh, I'm going to take one of them home with me. One of what home with you? What are you talking about? So sometimes children that you're talking with, you're like, I'm not actually sure what you're telling me here because we've not got that specific vocabulary in there. But with that comes that trouble understanding and learning new words, and trouble recalling the words that they do know. So sometimes they just don't know the word, and other times they do know the word, but when they need it, they can't remember what that word is. And then the speech sounds, which ties in a little bit with what Louise was saying earlier on. Although a lisp is not part of DLD, children can have speech sound difficulties as part of DLD. And it's that, it's learning and applying a rule, which is what applies in their sentences as well. So if you think of grammar, grammar is all about learning and applying rules. And speech sounds are much the same. So which sound goes where? Is it a long sound, a short sound, a loud sound, a quiet sound? So all of those speech sounds can be affected in some children. And also relating sounds to letters. So children with DLD might really struggle with their phonics and remembering that letter means that sound, making those connections between them and mixing up sounds. And with that also goes phonological awareness. So skills like rhyming, syllable awareness, all of that can come into that speech sound work. I was working with a 7-year-old little girl yesterday who has quite significant DLD. It's really impacting on her. And I was just curious about whether she knew and understood rhyme, could not identify words that rhyme, couldn't sort rhyming pictures together, couldn't produce a rhyming string. So we'd got pictures of a cat and a hat and a mat. Can you give me another word? No, didn't. Just couldn't do that. So that phonological awareness as well is part of DLD. So there is a lot on that slide that a child can struggle with DLD. And what you'll find is that children have their own unique profile. So every child with DLD does not struggle with all of those aspects of language, but they might have, so you might have a child that actually their vocabulary, remembering words they know, is their most significant thing, but they're great at communicating socially with their peers. Another child might really struggle with narrative, retelling stories, making up stories, following stories, but their speech is really clear and they don't have speech sound needs. So every child has a unique profile, just as every autistic child has a unique profile. And so, you know how we might say, oh, if you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child. And it's the same with DLD. If you've met one child with DLD, you've met one child with DLD. And every child will be slightly different. So I'm just trying to keep an eye on time as well. There we go. But support from teachers and from speech and language therapists can make a massive difference to these children. That's the good news. So have a listen to your children with DLD, children that you might suspect that maybe haven't been identified. They may talk less, but non-verbally they're very expressive and quite smart, especially at non-verbal tasks. But when they talk, look out for that vocabulary. Are they using simpler words? Are they struggling to learn those new words? So are there little clues that this child is struggling with language? Do they understand what's said to them? Do they have is understanding spoken language tricky but hidden? So looking for those little clues. So when I did a school visit this week for my 10-year-old that we've just diagnosed with DLD, when I watched her in the classroom, she was a fraction of a second behind her peers, but she was doing that little kind of, oh yeah, okay, we're doing that, right, that's what we're doing. And it was really interesting because there was a fire drill, as always happens when I go and see children in school. There's inevitably a fire drill somewhere every week for me. And there was a fire drill this day. And so there were very novel instructions for that child. It was, right, everybody needs to, don't do this, don't get your bags, don't get your coat, need to line up, do this. When we go outside, you'll need to answer the register. So there was a whole sequence of language that was very different to what that child, they might have one fire drill a term maybe. So quite different language. And it was so evident that she was watching the other children, watching what they did, following behind them. A little tip is if you say to children, do you understand? Do you know what you've got to do? I can pretty much guarantee that they will say yes. Because actually admitting that you don't know what to do for some children, especially if you say that in front of other children, is quite tricky. So sometimes they might say yes, and then actually what they do shows you that they didn't understand. That can also be because they think they have understood and they don't know that they haven't. So sometimes it is that, yeah, I know what to do. I'm not going to tell you that I don't because my friends might laugh at me. Or other times it's just like, yeah, I know what to do. Don't worry. And then they go off and they hand the book and you're like, this is not what I asked for. So rather than saying, do you understand? It's better to say to a child, tell me what you need to do. Because then you can see how much information they've understood. And that will tell you. So it's a nice way of finding out if a child has understood what you've asked them to do. Sometimes these children can follow short, simple directions, but not longer ones. And that might be, again, it might look like a behaviour. So if you say to a group of children, right, before you go out to play, can you come and put your reading books on my desk, please? And the child goes out to play. And you're like, no, I asked you to put your reading book on my desk. And they've left it wherever it was. That's a long and quite complex instruction. The order is reversed. So although we said go out to play first, handing you reading book second, that's not the way order they need to do it. They need to hand their book in and then go out to play. So sometimes those longer instructions are good clues that a child's not understood. And I always say as well that if a child, I don't know if you've had children where you ask them a question and they give you that answer that is slightly at a tangent, but it wasn't what you asked them. So you might say to a child, oh, did you have a lovely birthday at the weekend? Did you do anything special? And they go, I'm 6. And you go, oh, lovely. But that's not what I asked you. So those kind of where you ask a question and you get an answer at a tangent, that child might have heard the word birthday. Lots of people, when they have a birthday, say, how old are you? So that's probably what you're asking, because I didn't understand all that language. So I'm going to tell you I'm 6. So if you ask a question of a child and they answer it in a way that you perhaps weren't expecting or wasn't what you actually asked them, did they understand that question? And they probably didn't. The other thing that happens with children with DLD is that they rely on those context and nonverbal clues. So if you add in lots of gesture, lots of pointing, lots of visuals, objects, images into their learning, they'll understand far more. But if you're somebody that does that naturally, it means that you might miss that they're not understanding the language. So please don't stop doing any of that, because it's really important. But sometimes that masks that child's needs, because they're compensating for their language needs by using all those other clues, and it looks like they've understood, but they haven't. From an expressive language point of view, do they use those shorter sentences, lack connection between it? So perhaps that more complex sentence structure using words like because, but, although, all those different kind of connectives, are they missing? Have they got issues with their grammar? Word endings, missing out those little words from their sentences? And do they use less descriptive language? So using those adjectives to bring that richness to their language. And then their sequencing. So what's their organization of language like? What's their sequencing of ideas like? Can you understand when they're retelling something? Can you understand when they're writing a narrative of some kind? Or is it all over the place? So for some children, that narrative and sequencing is a really big clue that they've got DLD. I'm not going to do this in small groups. It's just going to be a logistical bit tricky today. But what I would ask you to do as a follow-on from this session is, with your team or your colleagues, have a think about which children in your class might have DLD. If there's none, there probably is a child or two that you're missing. So start thinking about those signs. Use that rattle image with all those different, the bubble one with all the different images on. Who does it make you think of? Who is maybe looking at their peers to follow instructions? Who's maybe really struggling to learn those new words that are so essential for topic? Who's maybe writing, when they're writing that narrative and that stories all over the place, and you think, I can't follow this whatsoever. So who does it make you think of?
Has anyone jumped to mind for anyone? I think when you said about the birthday, oh yes, I'm 6, that's a situation that I think many teachers can relate to. So is anyone brave enough to come on and say that they have had a child in mind as Gill has been talking? Please don't give the school or the child's name or the family name, but if you've has anybody got anything? I could think of so many children that you say, did you have a good weekend? And they go, I'm 6, completely unrelated.
I'm gonna, if you give me 1 minute, I'm going to show you my favourite. Hang on a minute.
Yeah. Anybody brave enough to come on and talk? They're all driving home, I think.
No, everyone's gone quiet. So
okay.
I don't know if you can see this picture. Oh, I've got it on blur. I don't know how to turn my blur off when I'm screen sharing. I'll try and hold it to the camera. Basically, there's a cartoon here of a girl, and there's a girl here just in vest and pants, basically. And it's it's assessing a child's ability to answer why questions and to form sentences. So what you say is, it's just a cartoon picture. Why is this girl cold? So I asked a little girl who was 8, why is she cold? And she went, Barbara. I said, all right. Why is she cold? Barbara. And I'm there thinking, what's going on here? So I said, yeah, but why is she cold? And she looked at me and she went, she called Barbara.
She hadn't heard. So how would you
Stupid woman.
differentiate
Why are you
that?
asking me?
So I would jump to a hearing test. That's where I would jump to from that.
Yeah. So that child did not understand the why question. They couldn't. Why questions are too complex. Investigated that a little bit more, asked a few different why questions, could not understand why questions. So what she did was turn that question into one that made sense for her. Right. So why is she cold turned into what is she called? Because
that's so complex. Because from my understanding, I would then jump to auditory processing, right? Not necessarily to DLD. And I think that one of the really important things we need to know as staff who are semi-professional in identifying these things, it really does need to be passed on to a real, we're specialists. I recognise all of the talent and skill and qualification and experience that my fellow teachers and heads of inclusion, etc. have. But I always say I'm actually qualified to assess, but I don't want to put a label on it because everything needs to be looked at. It's much more complex than just doing one test and coming up with one result. I used to work with a school that tested for dyslexia, and therefore every child became dyslexic. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think they can't all be dyslexic. It's a really fascinating process, but handing it off is so important. So as a speech and language therapist, are you able to identify DLD and things like autism and ADHD, or do you work collaboratively with other professionals if you see other presentations going on?
Yeah, so I am speech and language therapists are the only profession that can diagnose DLD. Right. I am trained to diagnose autism. I do autism assessments as part of my job, but I do that as part of a multidisciplinary team. So I cannot assess a child and then say to their parents, actually, your child's autistic, because that's not how assessments work. But what I would do to that parent is say, I don't think it's language, but there are some red flags that make me think your child could be autistic. And I think that that's worth exploring. Right. So I would always do that.
Lolita's got a hand up. Sorry, I cut you off then. Sorry.
No worries.
Lolita, would you like to take yourself off mute? You can either if you don't want to speak, you can put it in the chat. If you're quite happy to speak, then come off mute and join us. You're very welcome to.
Yes.
Hi. Have you got a question?
Hi, good evening. Hi. The thing is, I know of a child who quite, behaved this way. I'm not currently working with her. But the thing is, I always thought it was a language problem because English wasn't her first language. That wasn't her native language. She came from a different background. And I always mistook it like, probably she's not understanding because as you said, at home they use simpler words in English, but in school it's a more, it's more diverse and varied vocabulary from children, teachers, and everybody. So is that also DLD? Like it has anything to do with the first language or not the first language kind of a thing, or
it's an added complication, Lolita. Thank you so much for
your question.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Children who speak multilingual children can have DLD. I think for what we need to be clear of is there this child's needs around acquiring a new language when their home language is proficient. So if they're proficient in their home language and they are having difficulties acquiring a new language. So here in the UK, a child that is Polish, this family arrived from Poland, the child goes into an English speaking school, not being exposed to English, that child is obviously going to have language needs around English that are not caused by DLD. it's caused by English being an additional language for them. So you've got some children that their difficulty acquiring English or any other language, I'm saying English here because I'm in England, but I'm aware that it's different for all of you. So you need to look at what that child's home language is like. Have they got needs in the home language? If they're not got any needs in that language, then it's going to be learning an additional language. If they've got needs across both languages, then it will be a language need rather than EAL or learning an additional language. What good practice is to do is to assess a child in both languages. And in the UK, we use interpreters for that. So we will assess children in their home language and in English to look for that. As I've already mentioned at the start, sometimes parents might miss things because the language at home is so familiar. So you can't just rely on a parent going, oh, yeah, they're fine at home, they understand everything, because that doesn't mean they are. So, you need to assess a child in a home language as well as their English or their additional language to work out whether that language need is across both languages. And that's a very brief answer to that question.
I think from an English language perspective, we tend to say if a child is immersed in an English language environment, such as being full-time in an English language delivery school, then it would take roughly 2 years to become fairly fluent in English within that 2 years. So sometimes I've worked with children and I've kind of hit the brakes a little bit, and before jumping to special needs, you're right to think about the language barrier. But if after 2 years they're still struggling to acquire English, they're still struggling or demonstrating struggle in their own language as well, that's when I might have a baseline assessment done at the beginning so that I can show progress or no progress. And if they're still at the beginning of the 2 years, and then I might give them some intervention, some English language support, some different types of activities. I might involve a speech and language therapist to give some activities over that 2 years. I'm not going to leave them and they give no support for 2 years. But then at the end of the 2 years, if they're still struggling, that would be the time when I would then look towards, formally identifying and separating the English language from the need. Would you agree, Gill?
I would agree. And I would say if that parent is telling you that they're struggling in their home language, intervene. You don't wait 2 years.
Yes.
So if it's very apparent that that child has language needs in their home language, then you would intervene at the same point as you would for any other child.
And you can get second language in a lot of different languages online as well as speech language therapy support. That COVID has done that for us. It has opened us up to accessing therapy in different languages across the world. Thank you so much for joining in. I have another question for you. What is the difference between a learning disability or difference and DLD? So you covered that a little bit at the beginning, but I think this lady joined partway through. So what is the difference, let's recap, between a learning disability and DLD?
Okay, so DLD is where a child has no other reason for their language needs. So a child with a learning difficulty, child with, severe learning difficulties, can have speech, language and communication needs. A child with DLD, there is no reason for that language. So that's what makes DLD separate. So if it's a child with learning difficulties, then we would say that child has SLCN, has part of their learning needs, because there is a reason why they might have language needs. So I'm just thinking of a child maybe with Down syndrome or something, probably going to have differences with how they're developing language caused by their Down syndrome, not caused by DLD, but still got speech, language and communication needs. Is that okay? Does that answer?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Thank you not right. You're the expert. That's the answer we wanted. Thank you very much. Okay,
brilliant.
Let's go back into your
slide. Where are we up
to
time-wise? We've got 5 minutes left.
You've got 5 minutes. I'm happy to overrun, but other people might need to drop off. So let's try and wrap it up.
Fine.
If there is a need, if anybody wants to come back and further, explore this topic, we will always host another session. If you've got more questions, all you've got to do is get in touch with us, and we will put on a second session, or we could even have a coffee session, an online coffee. Whatever people want is what we would like to offer. Thank you very much. Okay, go for it, Gill.
No problem. And what you might want to do and come back to is a session around tips and what we do with these students, because we've chatted a lot, which means I'm just kind of aware of time, but I'm happy to come back if you need follow up around that. So top tips for supporting children with DLD around their understanding and their spoken language. And what I'm going to do is just talk through some top tips and chip in. If you've found other things that work in your classrooms, it would be great to hear about those. I'm not a teacher. I'm not immersed in classes with, I work children one-on-one. So I don't have those learning experiences that you have, but I do have the experience of the DLD. So understanding spoken language, if you've got a child with DLD, one of the best things that you can do is just use simple language. So keeping your language short, clear sentences to reduce that cognitive load. So children with DLD, they're given long instructions, can become overwhelmed, and that can lead to dysregulation, which is sometimes, again, why you might interpret them as autism, because they have complete meltdowns because they're overwhelmed. But also it can cause children to just switch off. If you were immersed in a language that you were not confident in and had a little bit of knowledge on, and you were immersed in that language all day, you would be fatigued trying to understand that language. And that is what it's like for children with DLD. So keeping your language really simple, clear sentences, reducing that cognitive load, and also that memory. So the first thing that children have to do in order to understand spoken language is they have to hold that chunk of information into their short-term memory while they process it. So using shorter language reduces that cognitive load from that point of view. Slowing down your own speech is helpful, but actually really tricky to implement as an adult. Slowing down your own speech is really hard. One way to do that effectively is just to add more pauses into your language. So I think it's easier to pause more than it is to slow down. So, right, everyone, can you get your reading book and come and sit on the carpet? It's just chunked that information. It's still the same instruction, but it's just giving that child a little bit of processing time just to follow that information. I don't know how widely visual supports are used in your schools. Visual supports they're just amazing. So if you say something to a child and they haven't remembered it or they can't process it, that language is gone. You can't do anything to bring that back other than repeat it and say it again. If you represent that spoken language in a visual way, a child has got something permanent to refer back to. So using visuals, using what we call task plans, so visual representation of instructions, all the different kind of visual supports that you can use are so helpful for children who've got differences with their remembering and processing information. Checking that understanding, talked about that already. Rather than saying, do you know what you've got to do, say, tell me what you've got to do. Such a simple, easy to implement strategy. No photocopying, no laminating, you're done. It's easy. And the other thing that's really helpful with children with DLD is to give them thinking time. So rather than expecting an immediate response, giving them 10 seconds to think and process that language. And that in itself is an incredibly powerful strategy. Because what sometimes happens is you expect a response, you give a child a couple of seconds, they've not responded, you think, well, they don't know this. And so you move on, you ask a different child, and that child then goes, oh, I know that, I just couldn't answer it because I didn't have time. So we call it the 10-second rule at Elklan, think 10 seconds, give that child thinking time, so important. And often children will get to 7-8 seconds and then answer your question. And you go, wow, oh gosh, they do know that. That was amazing. Whereas you might misjudge that child's knowledge so much. So those are some top tips for understanding. From a reading and writing point of view, any of the strategies that you use to support a child's understanding of spoken language will help them with their understanding of written language as well. Supporting their phonological awareness is so important. So my little girl I saw yesterday that can't rhyme, that's such a key skill for literacy, isn't it? For spelling, word patterns, all of that is missed for her because she hasn't got that rhyming skill. So looking at things like segmenting, blending, syllable awareness, rhyming, all of those different skills, so important. Your reading comprehension as well, supporting children with that. Sometimes you might ask a question and you think the child hasn't understood the story. They do understand the story. They don't understand the question that you asked them. So checking a child's understanding of a story, keeping your language really simple and your questions simple. So really helpful. And then for your narrative, again, visuals, so writing stories, story grids, story mountains, story maps, any of those kind of visuals, so helpful. And then just that awareness that DLD does impact on a child's emotional well-being and on their friendships. And don't forget to support them in those areas. As you support their language, you will have a positive impact on their emotional well-being and on their friendships, because their language improves, which enables them to develop those skills. But just being aware that children might need that specific support around expressing their emotions, using social stories and talking mats, ensuring that children know it's okay to make mistakes. All of that will support their emotional well-being as well. And then supporting those consistent routines with your visuals as well. So your visual timetable all helps them understand what's going to happen, which means they're regulated from an emotional point of view, which means they're ready to learn. So all of that is so important to consider alongside supporting them with their academic skills. I could talk all day about strategies to help children because that's my passion. But I'm just aware that we're already over time. That's just a brief summary of what we've talked about. So some key indicators, what DLD is, how it can affect children, and some very simple strategies. If this has whetted your appetite and you want to find out more about how to support children with speech, language and communication needs, there is an Elklan course. So Elklan is the company that I work for. They provide accredited training for practitioners, and a practitioner in Dubai, Jazz, is running a speech and language support for 5 to 11s. I will send this flyer out and ask that Louise sends it on with the PowerPoint, the slides. You can actually read that. I didn't think you'd be able to, but you can. So it's starting on the 31st of October, which is very, very soon, and it goes up to January, and it's 5 mornings. But Elklan is, I know I work for Elklan, so I am slightly biased, but before I ever worked for Elklan, I was an Elklan tutor for 14 years before I worked for Elklan, because I'm passionate about Elklan and I see the difference that it makes. So to me, Elklan courses are the gold standard of any speech, language and communication course training. So absolutely, if you can, I would so highly recommend that you take part. There is a link down there to apply, which I think you've got the link, Louise, haven't you?
It'll go out on the email with them.
It'll go out, brilliant.
It's a 5 half-day courses weekly from October through to January. It's being done, led by Jaspreet Bumber. Anybody in the UAE knows Jazz as a speech and language specialist. She's brilliant. And it's being held at Victory Heights. And I agree with you. I think that what sets Elklan apart is that they train parents, learning support assistants, teachers, anybody that is working with the children to help support their language and communication needs. And I think if we got communication right in schools, in the classroom, if there was more communication rich environment, which is what Elklan, one of the things they specialise in, then we would have probably not less struggles, because children are born with struggles. They're going to be there, but we would have less challenges that then affect and impact on self-esteem and motivation for young people in the classroom. We also had a webinar 2 weeks ago by Sunshine Therapy, where they talked about speech and language therapy, and they are also an Elklan provider. So go back onto our YouTube channel and have a look at that video if you are interested. If you are interested and you want to drop me a line, you can also ask for another follow-up session with Gill. I think your presentation was wonderful, Gill. So we can always come back on, like I said, and have a coffee time. All of the slides will be in the email that will come out after I finished editing. I won't edit them. When my team finish editing the video, you will get a copy of the video, a copy of the slides, a link to the sunshine video. You will get a flyer for the training that's coming up in October. So much stuff you're getting by signing up and being free. Also, feel free to share that widely. This isn't, it's not a paid event. So this is information that helps our community to get stronger with working with children. Don't be frightened for speaking to your educational psychologist or your speech and language therapist that you are working with. They are the specialists. And Gill did not learn about DLD by taking part in a 1-hour webinar. This gives us an insight. This gives us an idea of what we're looking for and the questions we might want to be asking, but that does not make us qualified to identify or diagnose a student as having DLD. These are specialist support structures. YouTube channel at Louise Inclusion for all of my socials. LouiseDawson.com has a page all about Elklan if you want to do some more research on there. Elklan have their own website as well. And next week we have a webinar on software, text to speech. So we're working with ReadSpeaker, and we have Berna Bauer and Jason Gibbons from ReadSpeaker. Berna Bauer from the GEMS Network, Head of Inclusion. She is going to talk to us about technology, AI, text to speech. Follow us on YouTube. Everything goes on there, and we appreciate you tuning in and joining us this evening. Thank you, Gill.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the comments coming through in the chat as well.
It's wonderful. No, people really appreciate it because it's, it is about helping children, and that's one thing the community has in common. Nearly everyone I speak with, it's about the children. So thank you very much for joining us. Go and enjoy cold England. We'll continue with our sunshine. And we really hope to have you back, and we'll see you again in a few months where we share some more delightful tips. Okay?
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good evening, and look out for that email. Speak soon. Bye-bye.